welcome back to another week of What's for Dinner. This week I have some more super easy and delicious meals to share with you. They're all very budget friendly and I think they're meals that your whole family is going to love. They're also very easy to put together on a busy weeknight. So if that is something that you are interested in, definitely make sure you keep on watching until the end. I do post these What's for Dinner videos every single Sunday, so hit that subscribe button if you don't want to miss out on any future videos. But let's go ahead and get into this week's What's for Dinner. So for the first meal this week, I'm actually making some Tuscan chicken in my Instant Pot. So to start off, I'm just getting all of my prep work done. So I have one onion here. It was a pretty small one. It's just a small yellow onion and I'm getting that chopped up and ready to go. And then I'm also using some sun-dried tomatoes for this. This was actually my first time making anything with sun-dried tomatoes and I have to say it turned out absolutely amazing. This is something I'm definitely going to be using a lot in the future. It just added so much flavor, but I'm measuring out about 1/3 of a cup of those. I did keep the oil in there, so it's not like I tried to get rid of the oil that was in the jar. I just measured out about 1/3 of a cup and chopped these all up. And then I'm heading over to my Instant Pot. I have a little bit of olive oil in the bottom and I'm adding in my onion to be sauteed. I did add in a little bit of butter, probably like a tablespoon just for some extra flavor. And I did not have very much olive oil on hand, so I definitely needed that butter in there because I didn't have enough oil otherwise. But then I'm just sauteing these up for a couple minutes until they start to soften. Once those are softening just a little bit, I'm adding in some garlic, a good couple scoops of garlic. You guys already know I love my garlic. Let that get nice and fragrant, and then you're gonna add in about a teaspoon of Italian seasoning and get all of that mixed together. So once those onions are nice and soft, you can just turn your saute mode off on the Instant Pot and you're gonna add in about 1 cup of chicken broth. Get that added right into your Instant Pot. You're also going to be adding in the sun-dried tomatoes that we had chopped up earlier. So like I said, this is 1/3 a cup of sun-dried tomatoes. And then this is the point where you're going to want to add a little bit of salt and pepper to taste. I didn't add a ton of it because I did add some more later on after the chicken was all done cooking. Go ahead and get all of that mixed together and then we're going to be adding in our chicken. So for the chicken for this, I'm using about 1.5 pounds of chicken thighs. Unfortunately, mine were frozen. It would be better to use the fresh ones, but you can definitely get by with using the frozen, but you're definitely going to want to cook it a little bit longer. The recipe said to do 12 minutes on high pressure. I probably had to do about 22 minutes. I'm going to have the full recipe linked down below for you guys, so it's just super easy for you to follow along with. So once your chicken is all the way cooked through, you're gonna let that do a natural release for about 10 minutes and then you're gonna be adding in a cornstarch slurry. So here I have about 1/2 cup of heavy whipping cream and 1 tablespoon of cornstarch, and I'm just mixing all of this together because we're actually gonna add it right into the Instant Pot. So now that the chicken is all the way cooked through, I'm just pulling that out onto a plate. I didn't mention this earlier, but mine were boneless chicken thighs, but you can definitely use the chicken thighs with a bone in them, and you can also have skins on there, but this is just what I had on hand. So now into just the liquid part, you're gonna be adding in that cornstarch slurry, and you're just gonna want your Instant Pot on saute mode while you do this. So once your cornstarch slurry has thickened this sauce up, you're gonna go ahead and add in a little bit of salt and pepper to taste. I added in just a little bit of sea salt and some black pepper, maybe like 1/4 teaspoon of each, but go ahead and just do that to taste. And then you're also going to be adding in about 1/3 cup of grated Parmesan cheese and letting that melt in the sauce as well. Now I am just adding my chicken right back into this Instant Pot and I'm just going to let this kind of heat back up for a few minutes while I am getting the garlic bread ready. So I have shared how I make garlic bread on my channel before. I keep it super simple, but it's very budget friendly to do it this way. So I always pick up this Italian bread at Walmart. It's $1 and a loaf will last us like probably at least 3 or 4 meals. So it's really affordable. And then I just put a little bit of this Smart Balance right on top. And I will say it's easier to spread it on when the bread is actually frozen. So when I get this bread, I just stick it right in the freezer and it lasts us for a really long time and it makes it easier to spread on the butter. So that's a little tip. Otherwise, if it's not frozen, I would say go ahead and melt the butter first just to make it a little bit easier for you. But this is just the way that I like to do it. I like to sprinkle the garlic bread with a little bit of this Lowry's garlic salt. This is definitely my favorite brand that I have found. And then this is going to go right into a 375-degree oven for about 10 minutes until it's nice and crispy. So this is how everything turned out. We've got our chicken, garlic bread, and then I just served it with some fresh green beans from our garden. We absolutely love this meal and I will definitely be making it again. For the next night this week, I made a super delicious taco pizza. I have shared this recipe with you guys on my channel before, but I definitely wanted to share it again because it's super delicious. So I'm starting off with getting my can of refried beans opened up. I'm using the Kitchen Mama can opener for this. Best kitchen tool ever. I'm gonna have it linked down below for you guys. I've shared it before, but it really is truly amazing because there's no sharp edges on this can, so I just love it. So over here on my stove, I have 1 pound of lean ground beef cooked up and ready to go. And I'm adding in 1 package of taco seasoning with maybe like a 1/3 cup of salsa. The salsa is optional, but I really like the flavor that it adds to this. And you're just gonna mix that together and then add in your can of refried beans. This can be a little bit tricky to get it out of the can and get it mixed in just because it is super thick. If you've ever worked with refried beans before, they're pretty thick. So this can be a little tricky to get it mixed in, but I promise you it turns out super delicious. So you can see I was struggling a little bit to get it mixed in. So if you're struggling like I am, go ahead and add in a little bit of water. I would add maybe like a 1/4 cup or something just to kind of get it a little bit softened and you can mix everything together better. But you're just gonna basically warm this up until everything is nice and warmed through. So now we are heading over to my baking sheet and getting the pizza dough ready to go. So for my recipe that I always use a KitchenAid pizza dough recipe. It's super delicious and easy to make, and it's just awesome because you can throw it right into your KitchenAid. It only takes a couple minutes and an hour to rise, and it's just easy. So I will have that link down below for you guys if you want to try out the KitchenAid pizza dough. I've been using it for years and we really like it. But for this pizza, I really like to do it in a rectangle baking sheet. You could definitely do it on a round one as well. I've done it that way, but for some reason with taco pizza, I just like to do it on a rectangle one. So I'm just getting that pressed into my pan and ready to go. I do like to pre-bake this for probably about like 7 minutes or so in a 400-degree oven just to kind of firm up that pizza dough before adding on this meat mixture. So now I'm spooning on that meat mixture. Trust me, this is not very pretty, but it does taste really good. This has so much flavor once you actually get all of the toppings on there. So stick with me. It's not very pretty, but I promise you it tastes really delicious. So once all of that is spread out, of course you're gonna need some cheese. So I am using a Colby and Monterey Jack blend. I would say either use some sort of a cheddar blend or a mixed blend of cheese would work really good for this one. I definitely do quite a bit of cheese. And then once you're done, you're gonna go ahead and pop this into a 400-degree oven for right around like 15 to 20 minutes until it gets to the doneness that you like. Well, I have mine in the oven. That's when I will always go ahead and prep all of my veggies to put on top. So for us on this night, I did some lettuce and I also did some tomatoes. You could do black olives, you could do peppers, you can literally add whatever you like on your pizza and it will taste super, super delicious. I will say iceberg lettuce pairs really, really well with this, especially when it's shredded up. Super delicious. And then here are those Roma tomatoes and I'm just chopping them up and getting them ready to go. So this is what the taco pizza looks like when it comes out of the oven. All of the cheese is nice and melted. And then I just cut up a slice here and I'm loading it up with all of the toppings. So I've got some lettuce, lots of tomatoes because I love tomatoes on my pizza. And then I like to do a little bit of salsa or taco sauce on here. And then to make it even better, you're gonna take some Doritos and just crush those up right on top. And I swear this just makes it so, so delicious. I've done it without Doritos before, but it is so delicious with them on there. And this is what everything turns out like. This is definitely one of my all-time favorite pizzas. For the next night this week, I made a Tuscan chicken pasta. So I made that Instant Pot chicken earlier in the week and I loved it. So I wanted to try out making my own pasta that's kind of similar flavors to it. So that's where I got the idea for this. I didn't follow a recipe or anything, but it honestly turned out so good. My kids ate this so well. So definitely try this one out. It was super creamy and delicious. But I'm just starting off with getting everything cut up and ready to go. So I have one large onion that I cut up and then I'm going to be using a 1/3 cup of those sun-dried tomatoes and getting those chopped up as well. I did go ahead and use the oil that was actually in the jar too, so I didn't try and get rid of that or anything. And then here I am just cutting up my chicken. So on my last video, I had somebody ask why the edges of my chicken were a little bit white, so I figured I would explain why. A lot of times I forget to pull out my chicken the night before or the day before, so I end up just throwing it into my microwave on the defrost mode, which is completely safe. It's actually one of the safest ways to defrost your chicken, but when I do that, it gets a little bit white on the edges because it just starts to cook a little bit, so that is why my chicken has those white edges. Don't worry, it's completely safe, you guys. So I just decided to pan fry my chicken and I just heated up a little bit of olive oil over medium heat, and then I am throwing in that chopped up chicken and just getting it seasoned up. So for seasonings, I actually did a little bit of Tony's on there, just barely any though. I did some onion powder, garlic powder, as well as some paprika, some sea salt, and some regular black pepper, and it turned out super delicious. We definitely really liked this combination. You definitely can skip the Tony's if you want. I barely used any, but it was pretty good on there. And then I'm actually heading back over to my cutting board, and I had about 6 pieces of bacon that was already cooked in my fridge, and I just chopped it up, and this is going to go right into our sauce as well. So once my chicken was all the way cooked through, I just went ahead and removed that from the pan and set it aside because I'm going to be using this same pan to actually make my sauce in here. So into that same pan, I'm adding in a little bit more olive oil, and then I have that onion that I chopped up, and I'm going to be getting this all nice and sauteed until the onions are nice and translucent in color. Once the onions are just about done cooking, I'm going to add in a big scoop of minced garlic during that last minute or so of the cooking time, and I'm going to cook that up for a good minute until it's nice and fragrant. Once that garlic is nice and fragrant, I'm adding in the bacon. Like I mentioned, mine was already cooked in my fridge, ready to go. You could probably even skip this if you want, but it did add a ton of flavor to this dish, so I definitely really liked it in here. So I just cooked that up for a good minute or so, let it warm up, and then I'm adding in 2 cups of chicken broth right into my pan. You're also going to want to add in your sun-dried tomatoes at this time. Like I said, this was 1/3 a cup. And then I'm also seasoning it up with some garlic powder and about 1 teaspoon of Italian seasoning. And you're just gonna let all of this come up to a simmer until it's nice and heated through. So once that sauce mixture has heated through, you're gonna get your cornstarch slurry ready. So here I have 1½ cups of heavy whipping cream with 1½ tablespoons of cornstarch, and you're just gonna whisk all of that together. This is gonna help thicken that sauce mixture on the stove. So now we are heading back over to the pan, and you're just gonna slowly whisk this in. You're just gonna wanna make sure that it's really well combined, and then heat this up for a few minutes until everything is nice and thickened together. Once your sauce has thickened up, you can go ahead and add your chicken back in there. I should mention, if you want more chicken, go ahead and do 2 chicken breasts instead of 1. This wasn't a ton of chicken, but we just weren't feeling a lot of meat on this night. And then I did add in some cheese. I just added in some mozzarella, but you could also do Parmesan if your family prefers that, and you're just gonna kind of melt all of that together. And this is the point where you can go ahead and taste it, see what you think. You're probably gonna want to add some salt and pepper. I definitely did quite a bit of salt and pepper in here, but this is just what you're gonna add to taste and see what your family thinks. The last step is just adding in a couple cups of spinach. Again, this is optional, but I always like to sneak veggies in where possible because you can add in a couple cups of spinach and you hardly notice it because it shrivels down to almost nothing. So I definitely liked the spinach in this one. So this is what your sauce should end up looking like. It was super creamy and delicious. Very easy to pull together for a busy weeknight, and my kids absolutely loved it. So we just served it over some thin spaghetti noodles, and this was probably my second favorite meal of the week. So for the next meal this week, I actually made some French dip sandwiches. They were super easy. I'm just using some roast beef from the store. It's so much easier to just use that instead of cooking it. I also have some Munster cheese. Provolone would have been better, but it's all I had. And then here I have my sub rolls that were really, really soft and delicious. So I am just starting off with some tin foil. I'm lining my pan with some aluminum foil. You're gonna want this so you can wrap it right around your bread and everything will get nice and melted together in the oven that way. And then here are these sub rolls that I'm using. These are the ones from Walmart. I've talked about them before, but they're always so good. You could also use Italian bread and then just cut it into pieces for your family. But this turned out really good to just use these little sub rolls. So now it is time to layer everything together. So I'm just starting off with the roast beef. I did use this whole entire package of roast beef. I will say for these sandwiches that you want to use a pretty good amount of meat to get the full effect of a French dip sandwich. So I used the full thing for these 3 sandwiches here. I actually got this recipe from Jess and the Boys. I'm gonna have her channel linked down below. I saw them on her What's for Dinner and I thought they sounded so good and also very easy. So that's where I got this recipe from. You guys are gonna love her. Go check her out. And then I'm also adding in my cheese here. So like I said, provolone definitely would have been the best for this, but all I had was Munster and I just used it up. So that's what I'm using, but use whatever you want. But then your sandwiches are done. Super simple and easy. I'm just taking some melted butter and that's gonna go right on top of these sandwiches. Then you're just going to wrap these up in the tin foil. I just made kind of like a little aluminum foil pocket just to seal all of the heat in. And then these went into a 350-degree oven for probably around 15 to 20 minutes just until all that cheese was nice and melted. While that is in the oven, I'm just mixing up my au jus gravy mix. Super simple and easy, nothing to explain here, just follow the directions on the back of your package. And then this is what the French dips look like when they came out. They were so good, you guys. The cheese was nice and melted. We absolutely loved them and it was super simple for just like a busy night. Definitely really like these. So I'm just serving them up with some broccoli and some au jus gravy and I definitely recommend this recipe. So for this next recipe, I'm making a sausage and orzo pasta. It really is the perfect summertime pasta because it's filled with tons of fresh veggies. So here I'm cutting up my zucchini. This was actually a pretty big one from our garden. You guys have probably noticed that I've been trying to use up tons of zucchini in all of my cooking and my recipes. We have so much of it in our garden, so I've just been trying to incorporate it wherever I can. So I'm just getting that one chopped up and ready to go. And then you're also going to want a pepper. You can use orange pepper, yellow pepper, red pepper, whatever you want or whatever you have on hand is totally fine. The recipe actually said to do strips for this, but I prefer to chop mine up. This is actually an old HelloFresh recipe that I've been making for years. I've kind of tweaked it to our liking and we really enjoy it. So that's how I do my peppers, and then I'm just throwing that into the bowl. For the tomatoes in this one, I am actually using Roma tomatoes. The original recipe called for like grape tomatoes or cherry tomatoes, but my husband doesn't really like tomatoes at all. So I will use the Romas and cook them down a little bit, and he doesn't notice them as much and he just prefers it. So I'm using Romas, but you can definitely use whatever you want to have in yours. You're also going to want some type of onion. So for me, I'm actually using a large yellow onion, but the original recipe actually called for a red or a purple onion. But my store did not have any of those because there was a huge recall, so all they had was yellow ones. So that's what I'm using. It worked out totally fine. Use whatever you have on hand and it should be just fine for this recipe. Now I promise this is the last thing that I'm going to be cutting up. I know this is a lot of chopping and prep work for this one, but I promise you it's worth it. Just get all the chopping out of the way to start off. So I'm actually using some sausage for this from our freezer, but what I normally use is some ground pork sausage, and I just saute that up in the pan like you would ground beef. So this was my first time making it with this sausage, and it actually turned out pretty good. I was impressed. I wasn't sure how we would like it. So you can either use some sort of sausage like this, or you can use a ground pork sausage. Either way is going to be totally fine, but I'm just heating up a little bit of olive oil, and then I'm going to be throwing things right into my pan. So here I have my onion and my sausage, and get that cooked together. So if you're using the ground pork, this is just the point where you're going to want to cook that up, and you should be able to cook it right with your onions. Now after my sausage is fully cooked through and my onions are nice and translucent in color, I'm just adding in the zucchini and the bell pepper, and then I'm seasoning it up with some salt and some pepper. I'm going to cook this for maybe like 5 to 7 minutes until the zucchini and the peppers start to soften. You definitely don't want to overcook it because the zucchini will get mushy if you do that. Once that has cooked a little bit, I'm adding in the Roma tomato. So this is where you can wait and add the tomatoes later on, but because my husband doesn't like the tomatoes, I usually will try and cook it down a little bit for him and let it turn more into like a sauce almost. And then here I'm adding in my orzo pasta. So this is 2 cups of orzo pasta. I'm just getting that ready to go while my tomatoes are cooking into my other mixture. So at this point, everything in this pan is completely cooked through and ready to go. I'm just adding in some garlic for maybe like a minute or so and letting that get nice and fragrant. I'm also adding a little bit more salt and pepper here before we actually add in the pasta. So you're just going to drain off that orzo pasta and then add it right into here. I do like to add in a couple dollops of butter just for some flavor. This is optional. It's something the original recipe did not call for. And then I'm also doing a little drizzle of lemon juice, probably like a couple teaspoons. And then you're going to want some salt and pepper. So this is definitely one of those dishes where you're going to want a lot of salt and pepper. It's just really going to bring out the flavor of all of the vegetables. You could also try to add in some other seasonings like garlic powder, really whatever you want you can go ahead and try out. But we like to keep this very just kind of fresh and simple. So I usually stick with just salt and pepper for this one. So after everything is all done, I'm just plating it up and topping it with a little bit of grated Parmesan. And I also decided to add on some dried parsley. You could also use fresh if you have that on hand, but this is what everything ended up looking like. Super, super simple, delicious pasta for the summertime. Alright guys, that is going to wrap up this week's What's for Dinner. I really hope that you enjoyed it. If you did, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. Hit that little subscribe button if you don't want to miss out on any more of these easy meal ideas. I do post a new What's for Dinner every single Sunday. Tons of grocery hauls, meal prep, things like that on my channel. So if that is something you are interested in, definitely make sure you are subscribed. Give this video a thumbs up, and I will see you guys in my next video. Bye!
As a young girl, the fields were mine. We played hide and seek for hours, raised our shadows among the pines. So offshore, playful and free, without a care.